About a week ago, the 2023 MLB Amateur Draft took place in Seattle during the All-Star break. Over 600 players were selected across 20 rounds, with the Mets making 23 selections throughout all 3 days. With the Mets attempting to bolster their farm system ever since the Steve Cohen era has begun, it is now time to review every single one of those picks from the 2023 draft by the New York Mets. So let's get started. So before we begin, I just want to let you guys know of how this is going to work. I'm going to give you the rundown of every single player that the Mets selected in this year's draft. I'll discuss some of his strengths, some of his weaknesses, and I'll also give a draft grade of what I think of the pick. Now, obviously, it's going to take years for any of these grades to actually be correct, or any of these takes to be correct. So I advise all of you guys to give your opinions of every single one of these players in the comments below. We all know how highly opinionated I can be. I like what I like. I hate what I hate. So if you like someone that I hate or hate someone that I like, let me know. So let's start from the very beginning of the draft with the Mets' first selection. So for those of you confused as to why the Mets were picking at the slot that they were, that is because the Mets are currently over the fourth luxury tax threshold. With almost a $400 million payroll as of right now, the Mets' draft slot went down 10 slots. So instead of picking at number 22, they were picking at number 32 in the competitive balance round A. So we can thank the 2 Cy Young Award candidates this year, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, for that feat. Hell yeah. So with their first draft pick at 32nd overall, they selected Colin Houck, a shortstop / third baseman from Parkview High School in Georgia. Houck is currently 18 years old. He's 6'2", 190 pounds. He's coincidentally enough also a former 2-sport athlete in high school as a 3-star recruit quarterback. Now, as for the baseball side of things, he does have a plus combination of great strength and bat speed, and he's primarily a pull hitter. Now, he does whiff and chase frequently, and he does have some trouble with the breaking ball, but overall as a player, he has solid speed as an average base runner, a plus arm with outstanding body control, and he does have the big shortstop frame that could move over to third base later in his career. Now, overall, I personally really do like this pick. I think it was a great selection for the Mets. It definitely balances out a type of hitter that the Mets have definitely lacked in their farm system for a while. But he definitely was not my first choice, especially with a few of these players that did drop to the 32 slot. Yohanny Morales was definitely a selection that I would have preferred to go with at this 32 slot, mainly because I think that his bat is a little bit more developed. So Colin Houck overall I think was a good pick. It just wouldn't have been my first choice, and he just isn't my favorite pick in this draft. And that brings us to my favorite pick in this draft, which was 56th overall in the second round, Brandon Sproat, a right-handed pitcher out of the University of Florida. Now, you may recognize this name from last year because the Mets actually drafted him in round 3 and he did not sign. I personally was upset that the Mets did not sign him last year, and for the last year I've definitely thought of him as one of those draft guys who may have been the one that got away. But the Mets selected him once again. He's 22 years old now, 6'3", 250 pounds. He has a potential 4-pitch mix with a work-in-progress changeup. He touches 100 to 101 miles an hour with his fastball, but regularly sitting at 96 to 97 miles an hour. He has a mid-90s wipeout cutting slider, and he also has a slow-style get-me-over curveball. Over the past few years, his overall command has progressed, and even though his fastball shape can be inconsistent, he does have the stuff of a potential high-leverage reliever, but he can provide length as a starter. And I do have a strong feeling that the starter versus reliever debate as for Sproat is going to be answered probably in the first year of his minor league career. Now, with this so-called pitching lab that it looks like the Mets are definitely focusing in the minor league levels, Brandon Sproat, I believe, is one of those main focuses that could definitely have the upside to be a very, very good arm at the major league level. This is my favorite pick, and I believe that it was their best pick out of the entire draft. And that brings us to the first of 2 third-round picks for the Mets in this draft. In the 91 overall slot, Nolan McLean. Now, this is definitely the most intriguing player because he is a two-way player. He is a pitcher and an outfielder. He's 21 years old. He's 6'4", 214, out of Oklahoma State University. Now, overall, as a player, he was one of the most intriguing two-way players in all of college baseball in the last few years. Now, from just the pitching side, pro scouts have believed that he can succeed on the mound with the upside of being a possible mid-rotation starter in the majors. He's got high-profile stuff that he seems to deliver with very small effort. He's got a fastball with arm side run in the high 90s, a plus hard slider in the mid 90s, and an upper 70s curveball. I personally believe that this guy's stuff is very close to major league ready, but the control and command is still a work in progress, which is a main reason why that in college he was mainly just a reliever at Oklahoma State. Now, as for him as a position player, he does prefer to hit, and he generates extremely high exit velocities with massive raw power to all fields. The only problem is he is a very frequent free swinger with very high whiff rates on breaking balls, and he is a below average base runner, but his 70 grade arm strength definitely headlined him as a possible outfielder as a position play. A two-way player is always intriguing, especially since we have seen in the last few years the emergence of Shohei Ohtani. Everyone wants to find the next one. Do I think that he will be Shohei Ohtani? Most likely not. I personally like this pick. I'm a huge fan of the power. I feel like if the Mets were starting to develop these young arms in the right direction, Nolan McLean, just like Brandon Sproat, could definitely be on that line in the next few years. Moving to the second third-round pick by the Mets at 101st overall was Cade Morris, a right-handed pitcher out of the University of Nevada. The Mets got this pick as compensation for not signing Brandon Sproat last year, so with the possibility of turning one arm into two, since Brandon Sproat did end up coming to the Mets, definitely seems like a good deal. Morris is 21 years old. He's 6'3", 190 pounds. He has a very lanky frame, but he does have a lot of room to add strength to possibly throw harder in the future. But as for right now, his fastball runs up to 95 to 96 miles an hour and sits at about 92 to 93, but the pitch can lack deception. He also can have inconsistent breaking stuff with a mid-80s slider and a 12 to 6 type curveball. His 55 overall grade changeup seems to be his most effective pitch, but this is definitely packaged with above average control and average command. Now, this might not sound like a flashy pick, and personally, I'm not very high on this, but it's a decent pick for the slot value that they got. One thing that you can point out with Morris is that at the certain location that he was pitching for most of his collegiate career, it was about 4,000 feet above sea level. So the elevation definitely fluctuated his results. I wouldn't use that as a particular excuse, especially going into the minor league level, but the move to the East Coast could most likely make him look like a lot more of a complete pitcher than he does as per the scouting report. Particularly not my favorite type of pitcher, but there is definitely a possibility where he could be effective at the major league level. Moving to the first of three selections that the Mets made in the fourth round, at 123rd overall, Wyatt Hood, a right-handed pitcher out of UNC Charlotte. Out of all the selections that I've mentioned so far, this one was probably my least favorite. He's 21 years old, 6'4", 220 pounds. He has this 3/4 hybrid type arm slot that definitely produces a lower release point. His fastball sits at about mid to low 90s, but it can be very home run prone. He has a low 80s high spin power 12-6 curveball as his go-to put away pitch. He has a solid bridge cutter and the occasional changeup, but as per a lot of pro scouts, they have seen him as just a back end reliever ceiling, which is one of the reasons why I'm not the biggest fan of this pick. Taking the potential ceiling of just a reliever is definitely not the best value in the fourth round. Even though there is some upside with a solid bridge cutter, the overall command of his pitches are a huge concern for me. Reliever with fly ball and home run issues does not get very far in this league. So once again, the development will speak for itself. And at 21 years old, the room to grow is definitely pivoting. And that turns us to the Mets' second compensation pick in this draft and the first in the fourth round at 134th overall, A.J. Ewing, an infielder out of Springboro High School in Ohio. The Mets received this draft pick in compensation to giving the qualifying offer to Jacob deGrom and him signing elsewhere. So he obviously has some big shoes to fill. I'm only kidding. One thing that has really jumped off the page with Ewing is that he has been seen as one of the most electric players and one of the biggest spark plugs out of this entire MLB Draft. He's 18 years old, he's 6 foot, 160 pounds, but he does have room to continue growing muscle. He has plus bat speed with a very fluent, quick swing, and most of the hitting damage that he does is from the pull side, which we all know I'm a big fan of. He has above average speed as a plus base runner. He's an overall strong middle infield defender, but his overall average arm could move him to second base in the future. One of my pet peeves with these small frame players is one of those small, sneaky development notes of him having this slept on power. Within this day and age, doesn't really translate the best in the major leagues. But I do think that Ewing's approach is something that could definitely turn him into a plus power bat, hitting 15 to 20 home runs a season. Now at 18 years old, I think that there is plenty of upside, and due to his scouting, there still is a lot of room to grow for him as an offensive player. Another thing that I do like about him is his overall pitch selection at the plate, and hopefully that translates to him sacrificing a lot of contact for power. As for the overall draft slot value, I think it was a pretty good pick. Now immediately after, the Mets had yet another 4th round compensation pick with the 135th pick in the draft. That being Austin Trosser, a right-handed pitcher out of the University of Missouri. Now this compensation pick came from the Mets giving the qualifying offer to Chris Bassett and him signing elsewhere. Trosser is 21 years old. He's 6'3", 189 pounds, a very tall and slim frame. He throws from this 3/4 arm slot with a lot of effort in his delivery, which can reach to spotty command. He has a very high-profile fastball that tops at about 98 miles an hour and sits in the mid-90s with heavy vertical break and very high spin. This high spin also translates to his curveball that sits in the 2,800 plus RPM range. Now, Trosser still has a lot of room for development, but it looks like to me that he is just a 2-pitch pitcher. And there's no problem with that, but a fastball and curveball combo, it's not the best pairing. But he does have the high spin rate to make up for it, so maybe there could be some development in his repertoire to maybe add a 3rd pitch, like a possible slider or a cutter. And I think that putting it all together with this high-profile stuff, it will be worth it in the end if he does reach that potential, but there is a possibility that this could just 100% flop. I'm not saying he's a boom or bust pitcher, but I think the lack of depth is definitely a concern going into his minor league career. Compensation picks are completely out of the way now. We get to the 5th round pick for the Mets at 159th overall, Zach Thornton, a left-handed pitcher out of Grand Canyon University. Thornton is 21 years old. He's 6'3", 170 pounds. He's been described as a very highly athletic mound presence, but he lacks the amount of plus pitches, and he only thrives on pure control. He's been scouted to have a very limited ceiling of a back-end starter, with his fastball topping at about 94 miles an hour and sitting in the low 90s. He also does have the lack of breaking ball bite, but he does have plus command. He also has a low 80s changeup that pairs decently with primary velocity. I personally believe that he just doesn't have a true out pitch, but overall he does have a deceptive delivery. There are some redeeming qualities as a possible left-handed specialist, but I think that we have reached the point where lefties need to be able to face right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters regularly. And him having a possible profile of a starter, that definitely worries me a lot. Out of all 23 picks that the Mets made, I would definitely put Thornton in my bottom 3. The raw ability and pitch ability of a left-handed pitcher these days is extremely important, and it just does not look like he has it. But once again, there is still tons of room to grow. Moving to the 6th round pick at 186th overall, the Mets selected Jack Wenninger, a right-handed pitcher from the University of Illinois. He's 21 years old, 6'4", 210, a plus athletic frame. He was definitely a late bloomer in draft ranks after adding a lot of muscle last year. His fastball sits at about 93 to 95 miles an hour with about balanced movement, and he has 2 off-speed pitches, which he thrives with more with control over command. One of the biggest factors that you're going to probably look at down the line with Wenninger during his development is most likely just the shape of his pitches. This is one of the wait and see picks, I believe. It'll be interesting to see how he could build that through the levels of the minor leagues. This is also another pitcher that I would definitely encourage to add one of these bridge pitches, such as a cutter or a slider with some extra movement. In the particular draft slot of 186, I would say this is a pretty solid pick. Moving on to round 7 of the draft, at 216th overall, the Mets selected Noah Hall, a right-handed pitcher out of the University of South Carolina. Hall is 22 years old. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds. He's been categorized as an undersized pitcher with inclined velocity that regularly sits at 92 to 94 miles an hour, but he does touch 96. Although from the obsolete standpoint, his changeup has been scouted as a high plus pitch, but what I do like about this changeup that he does have, it's very balanced in dominance against both left-handed hitters and right-handed hitters. He also has an occasional plus spinning slider, but there was definitely a limited sample out of his collegiate year this year due to a back injury this season. When I look at Noah Hall, I definitely see a decent possible balance between pitch ability and just overall stuff. I don't think that him being undersized makes him a Spencer Strider type of pitcher with high profile fastball stuff and a lot of devastating sliders, but I think if you're looking for a more balanced pitcher to possibly give you length as a starter, I think that's definitely a decent ceiling for Hall. But he already is 22 years old, so we'll see how the progression unfolds in his minor league career. With their 8th round pick at 246th overall, the Mets selected Boston Barrow, a shortstop out of Capistrano Valley High School in California. Barrow is 18 years old. He's 6'2", 170 pounds. Overall, he has a very narrow athletic frame with a very loose and balanced lefty swing. His pitch selection and patient approach at the plate is 100% a plus. He's never been a huge power bat, but there is a strong possibility that he can add strength to this tall 6'2" frame. He has above average speed. He's a plus infield defender, but just like his power, there is still a lot of room to grow with his arm strength and accuracy. I've been seeing a lot of Mets fans be very impressed by this pick of him dropping to the 8th round as a prep school shortstop, but I personally am not a big fan of this selection because of just the straight up lack of power, especially with how power driven this game can be. Now, at 18 years old, Barrow has a lot of room to improve, but from his raw ability and his 6'2" frame, I expect a little bit more power from a player like this. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, but it just doesn't do it for me so far. In the 9th round, with the 276th overall pick, the Mets selected Nick Larusso, a third baseman out of the University of Maryland. He's 22 years old, 6'2", 215 pounds. Overall at the plate, he does have some unconventional mechanics. He has this slight toe tap swing, but the overall loft extension follow through helps him average 90 plus mile per hour exit velocities with huge quality of contact. Now, there's a reason why he is listed as a third baseman. He does have the arm strength of a former pitcher in high school, which has provided accuracy from the hot corner, but he also does have the frame to play first base as well. It all pretty much depends on the developed athleticism that will most likely shape his primary position at the higher level. Power corner bats are definitely important, especially from the third base position, which is something that I really do like about Larusso, but it will be interesting to see where that power ceiling ranks once he gets playing at the minor league level. At 22 years old, being one of the older players, possibly in the lower levels, we'll get to see real quick what he is possibly capable of on the power side. Now, that first base, third base type of hybrid player is definitely something that I do like, not just the versatility, but the balance of positional value. It will still be interesting to see the upside unfold at age 22. And that brings us to, in my opinion, the biggest steal of this draft, being their 10th round pick at 306th overall, Christian Pregent, a catcher out of Stetson University. This kid is 23 years old. He's 6'3", 210 pounds. He has been scouted as one of the most legit defensive catchers with the current skills to possibly be a big league catcher. Now, offensively, he made drastic changes to his swing mechanics over the last year, and that has turned him into a power-driven hitter with a huge uppercut swing. As for his overall swing mechanics, his lower and upper halves can be a little bit inconsistent, and it can cause him to have a few launch angle issues. The potential of Pregent is definitely high, and the fact that the Mets did get him in the 10th round at this certain slot is fantastic value in my opinion. Like I just said before, out of all 23 picks, I feel like this one was the biggest steal of the draft for the Mets. With their 11th round pick and the 336th overall selection, the Mets took Brett Banks, a right-handed pitcher from UNC Wilmington. Banks is 22 years old, 6'3", 205 pounds. He's a known power pitcher with a high 3/4 arm slot with a big whipping motion. He has an above above average graded fastball sitting at 95 to 96 miles per hour and can touch 98 with a high spin rate. He does have a low to mid 80s slider with short and sharp break, which scouts have seen as a possibility that can help him develop a plus cutter. Now, he does have the occasional command issues, but overall has plus control on all 3 of his pitches. This is definitely one of my favorite picks out of the entire draft. This is mainly because I have a strong feeling that he will turn into a very good primary strikeout pitcher. And even with this less effortless motion, it's definitely possible that he could be a reliever, but there is a strong possibility that he also could be a starter. He has been able to provide length a lot during his collegiate career, and the positive control that he has on his repertoire is definitely very encouraging. Overall, one of my favorite picks. With their 12th round pick, 366th overall, the Mets selected Brady Kirtner, a right-handed pitcher from Virginia Tech. Now, just like the Mets' 7th round pick in Noah Hall, he's definitely undersized. Kirtner is 22 years old. He's 5'11", 170 pounds. But he is particularly a very hard thrower with his fastball up to 97 miles an hour. But overall, his slider is his best pitch with an elite level of spin rates, and he definitely prioritizes getting chases and whiffs. Now, unlike Noah Hall, I believe that Kirtner is more of a possibility to be a reliever than an actual starter because he does have a lot of walk problems, and it looks like he most likely will succeed the best as a 2-pitch pitcher. There's definitely upside here, and I do like this pick overall. We'll see how the Mets pitching development does with this type of repertoire. On to the 13th round with the 396th overall pick, the Mets selected Ben Simon, a right-handed pitcher from Elon University. Now, just like Kirtner, he is another undersized pitcher. With a small frame at 21 years old, he is 5'11", 197 pounds. Now, unlike Kirtner, he does not really have that much of a walk problem. He throws from a very loose and repeatable 3/4 arm slot where he regularly touches the high 90s with a very high spin rate and also adding a little bit of late zip. He also has a 2600 to 2800 RPM curveball in the mid 70s, and his slider is currently a work in progress. Now, with Kirtner, I think that there's more reliever upside there, but with this following pick with Ben Simon, I think that he has a little bit more starter upside, and that's the main reason why I gave this a higher grade, considering that he was also a lower pick than Kirtner. There's still depth in this arsenal that he does need to work on to be a possible starting pitcher, but it's a wait and see, in my opinion. In round 14, with the 426th overall pick, the Mets selected John Valle, a right-handed pitcher from Jefferson High School in Florida. This Cuban-born right-hander is 19 years old, 6'3", 196 pounds. He throws from a very low 3/4 arm slot. He has a low 90s fastball that tops at about 94 miles an hour with heavy arm side movement, but the pitch can sit around the 25 RPM mark. He also has a mid to high 70s curveball with an 11-5 break that has some extra bite with stronger spin rates. He's also been scouted to have a plus sweeping action slider and also has a work in progress changeup. I think there's a decent amount of upside here, especially from a 14th round pick. And with this 6'3" frame, I do expect this guy to add a little bit more velocity as his minor league career progresses, but the overall shape of his pitches is definitely the most impressive part of Valle. Definitely a quality pick for someone who fell to the 14th round. In the 15th round, with the 456th overall pick, the Mets selected Justin Lawson, a right-handed pitcher from North Carolina State. Now, there is not much information on this guy, so bear with me here. He's 22 years old. He's 6'3", 198 pounds. Now, he is projected in the major leagues to possibly be just a reliever. He does have big strikeout stuff. He's got average command, but plus control. Now, that is pretty much all that I really know about him and all I've really researched about him because there's not really much information on Lawson. So if somebody can give me some more information, I would love it. That's the reason why I pretty much went neutral with this grade with a C, because I can't really make a full judgment whatsoever with a lack of information. So I'm fully being honest here and telling you I pretty much know nothing about this guy. So that moves us to the Mets' 16th round pick at 486th overall, Jake Zetella, a third baseman out of St. Charles East High School in Illinois. As the youngest draft pick in this entire Mets class, at 17 years old, he is 5'11", 193 pounds. He's a very stocky frame infielder, but he does have really good bat speed with a 55 raw grade power via Baseball America. Now, even though he does hit the ball hard, he has pretty much peaked around that 75th percentile in exit velocity, so he does have some upside to improve. It's possible that he might be at his current power ceiling based on the 5'11 frame, but we'll see how he progresses throughout his young minor league career. Overall, he is a very serviceable defensive third baseman. He also does have some plus speed and athleticism. It's possible that Zetella also gains some height, so we'll see if he will be at that third base position in his minor league career as time goes on. I do like this guy's swing. He's very quick to get to the ball, and that's definitely a raw skill that could possibly translate to the minor league system. With their 17th round pick at 516th overall, the Mets selected Bryce Jenkins, a right-handed pitcher out of the University of Tennessee. Jenkins is 22 years old. He's 5'11", 175 pounds. It looks like he's primarily just a two-pitch pitcher, sitting around 92 to 94 miles an hour, but he does have a high-profile spin slider. I think that this is definitely another MLB reliever ceiling, but the overall depth of these two pitches could sprout a third pitch, such as maybe a cutter and possibly a hard sinker. I'm not really high on this pick, but we're in the 17th round at this point. At age 22 and at 5'11", it doesn't look like there is much to grow in terms of velocity, and that's a huge thing, especially with a major league reliever ceiling. With the Mets' 18th round pick at 546th overall, they selected Gavin Jones, a left-handed pitcher out of White Oak High School in Texas. Jones definitely fell very low in the draft. That's more just because of a lot more injury concerns. But at age 19, 6'2", 200 pounds, there's definitely some upside. He's been scouted as having a very physical build, and he was ranked 260th overall by Baseball America. So overall, some decent value. His fastball touches 95 miles an hour, but regularly sits at 92 to 93. He's got a hard slider, an overall average changeup. He does have the frequent control issues, but he definitely can produce a lot of whiffs. In terms of value, I think that this is a really good pick, and it looks like he is expected to sign, so there could be a decent piece of lightning in a bottle for this pick. Now, speaking of signing with the team, with their 19th round pick, 576th overall, the Mets selected Christian Little, a right-handed pitcher out of LSU. Little is 20 years old. He's 6'4", 225 pounds. He was a highly regarded prospect out of high school with a high-spin fastball that touches 98 miles an hour, and he has a kitchen sink repertoire with a cutter, a slider, a curveball, and a changeup. Now, the reason why I bring up signing with the team is that Christian Little has already declared that he is going to be returning to LSU next year. He will not be signing with the Mets this year. I'm not going to go full detail on Christian Little, but I personally think this was a fantastic pick, but apparently it just wasn't meant to be. And as for the Mets' final pick in the draft at round 20, 606th overall, Kellum Clark, an outfielder from Mississippi State University. Clark is 22 years old, 6'4", 205 pounds. He's a very balanced contact/power lefty bat. He has plus exit velocities, but he does struggle a lot with breaking ball. He also does come with some swing and miss inconsistencies, but overall as a player, he's a solid defender with a plus arm and some serviceable speed. Now, the scouting report on Clark definitely would be a little bit more encouraging if he was a little bit younger, but overall, this is the Mets' last pick in the entire draft. The expectation most likely is not high, but with the lack of outfield depth that the Mets have throughout their entire minor league and major league, you never know. And there's a possibility that Clark could be a big steal. So there is a breakdown of all 23 Mets draft picks in the 2023 MLB Draft. Let me know in the comments below, what was your favorite pick? What is the most sneaky pick? The most underrated pick? All of that in the comments below. Obviously, I'm judging these players based on them not even playing a single game with the Mets organization, so I'm not trying to show this as overreacting to any of these picks because we never know with the development through the minor league system, but you can definitely tell that I'm higher on a lot more selections than others.